The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, and the ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top during long sessions. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive chamber, and their bodies came in every shape imaginable. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, while others swam in portable water tanks, and a few existed only as projected holograms from distant worlds. Today, every single one of them had come to witness history. High Ambassador Vex Thorn of the Dominion Collective rose from his crystalline throne, and his body pulsed with colors that shifted from deep purple to angry red. His species communicated through light patterns as much as sound. And right now, every alien in the chamber could read his fury. The translation devices hummed to life as he began to speak. For 1,000 of your Earth years, we have watched humanity spread across the stars like a disease that refuses to die. His words echoed through the chamber, and the human delegation sat quietly in their section, listening without expression. We granted you peace when you were nothing more than primitives playing with technology you barely understood. Vex Thorn continued, and his form grew brighter with each sentence. We allowed you to colonize worlds that should have belonged to superior species, and we tolerated your arrogance because we believed time would humble you. He paused and let the silence stretch. We were wrong. A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens, and many of them had waited centuries for this moment. Humanity had always been different, and not in ways the galaxy appreciated. They bred too quickly and spread too far, and asked too many questions about things that did not concern them. The Dominion Collective, along with 17 allied species, formally declares war upon the human race. Vex Thorn announced, and his voice rang with triumph. You will surrender all colonies beyond your original solar system, and you will submit to population controls, and you will accept permanent monitoring of your technological development. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval and alien. Diplomats chirped and clicked and hummed their support. This was the natural order being restored, and the upstart humans would finally learn their place. Ambassador Sarah Chun of Earth sat at the center of the human delegation, and she was a small woman with gray hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She had served as humanity's voice in the council for nearly 40 years, and she had known this day would come eventually. Everyone had known. The formal declaration continued for another hour as Vex Thorn listed humanity's crimes against galactic civilization. They had refused to share certain technologies, and they had expanded faster than their quotas allowed, and they had inspired dangerous ideas among the worker castes of several species. When he finally finished, the chamber fell silent, and every eye and sensor and optical organ turned toward the human delegation. You have one standard day to respond, Vex Thorn said, and his color shifted to a smug golden yellow. Though we already know what your answer will be, and we are prepared for your surrender, Ambassador. Chun stood slowly, and she smoothed her formal jacket and cleared her throat. The aliens leaned forward, expecting tears or anger or desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, Sarah Chun began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, but it grew into a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the massive chamber. The other human delegates joined her, and some of them had to wipe tears from their eyes. Vex Thorn's form flickered with confusion and anger. You dare mock this assembly, he demanded, and his color shifted to dangerous crimson. You dare laugh at your own extinction. Sarah held up a hand and took a moment to compose herself. I apologize, she said, and her voice carried clearly through the translation systems. That was unprofessional of me, but I simply could not help myself. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. You see, High Ambassador, you have made a terrible mistake, and it is not the kind of mistake that can be fixed with bigger fleets or better weapons. Explain yourself, human. Sarah stepped forward, and her small frame somehow commanded the attention of every being in the room. 1,000 years ago, you forced peace upon us, and you thought you were containing a threat, And you believed that without war humanity would grow soft and weak and manageable. She smiled, and it was not a cruel smile but something almost sad. You gave us 1,000 years without enemies. I, Ambassador, undo. You know what humans do when we have no one to fight. The chamber was utterly silent. We prepare for the next fight. Vexthorn's form dimmed slightly. We used every single day of your peace. Sarah continued, and her voice grew stronger. While you watched us paint pictures and write poetry and build universities, we were also doing other things. Your surveillance. Vexthorn interrupted, and his confidence wavered for the first time. We monitored everything, and you showed no military development beyond basic defense forces. We showed you exactly what we wanted you to see. The words hung in the air like a blade. For 1,000 years, every human government, every corporation, every research institution has been working toward this day, and we knew it would come because we understand something about the universe that you apparently do not. Sarah looked directly at Vexthorn. Peace is not the absence of conflict, High Ambassador, and peace is preparation, and peace is the time you use to ensure that when war comes you will survive it. She gestured to her fellow delegates, who rose as one. We accept your declaration of war, and we do not ask for mercy, and we do not offer surrender. The human delegation began walking toward the exit, and Sarah paused at the door. One more thing, High Ambassador, and please share this with your allies. She turned, and her eyes were calm and certain. You think you know what humans are capable of because you have watched us for a millennium, but you only saw what we let you see. And the truth is going to be very educational for everyone. The doors closed behind her, and the chamber of Vexthorn tried to project confidence. But something cold had settled in his crystalline core. The human had not been afraid, and she had not been angry. She had been amused, and that was somehow the most terrifying response imaginable. The war had begun, but already something felt deeply wrong. Within hours, the Allied fleets would launch their first attacks, and within days they would learn exactly what Sarah Chun had meant. But for now, they celebrated their coming victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the dark between the stars. Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the swirling colors of hyperspace fade as his fleet emerged into normal space. 3,000 warships followed behind him, and they represented the combined military might of 12 species. This was the largest attack force ever assembled in galactic history, and their target was the human colony of Proxima 3 in the Alpha Centauri system. According to collective intelligence, Proxima 3 was a simple agricultural world with barely 2 million human inhabitants and minimal orbital defenses. It would be an easy first victory and a message to humanity that resistance was futile. Begin scanning the system, Korath ordered, and his deep voice rumbled through the bridge. I want to know exactly what we are dealing with before we proceed. His tactical officer bent over her console, and her insectoid eyes flickered across multiple screens. Then she froze. Admiral, she said, and her voice carried an unfamiliar tremor. There must be an error in our sensors. Explain. The planet below does not match our intelligence reports, and where we expected 2 million humans, our scans show nearly 4 billion. Korath felt his stomach tighten. That is impossible, and colonies do not grow that fast. There's more, sir. The main view screen flickered, and the image that appeared made every officer on the bridge fall silent. 17 massive structures orbited Proxima 3, and each one was larger than any shipyard the collective had ever constructed. Ships poured from those yards in steady streams, and they were designs that no one had ever seen before, sleek and angular and somehow wrong in ways that made Korath's eyes hurt to look at them. Count the enemy vessels, he commanded, and he was proud that his voice remained steady. 800 and climbing, Admiral, and more emerge every minute. Korath gripped his command chair. Energy readings. His tactical officer made a sound that her species only produced when facing death. Each human ship is outputting more power than our entire fleet combined, and I do not understand how that is possible, because nothing that size should be able to generate such energy. A communication request flashed on the screen, and Korath straightened his uniform before accepting it. The face of a human woman appeared, and she wore a military uniform covered in medals and ribbons. Her hair was steel gray, and her eyes were calm and almost kind. "I am Fleet Admiral Margaret Wu, Commander of the Seoul Defense Initiative," she said, and her voice was pleasant, like she was greeting a friend. "We have been expecting you, Admiral Korath. You know my name. We know everything about you, and we have known for quite some time that you would lead the first attack, and we even knew which system you would target." Korath felt cold, despite the warmth of his bridge. "You are bluffing human, and your tricks will not save you." Admiral Wu smiled gently. "Admiral, I am going to explain something to you, and I need you to listen very carefully, because your survival depends on understanding what I say." She leaned forward slightly. "During the 1,000 years of peace, you watched us, and you saw artists and scientists and philosophers, and you believed we had grown weak and harmless. Your surveillance showed no military development," Korath said, and he hated how defensive he sounded. "We let you see what you expected to see, and meanwhile, we built fleets in pocket dimensions that your sensors could not detect, and we seeded every colony with technology that can transform agricultural equipment into weapons of war in less than an hour. Impossible. We developed energy sources that your physicists would consider violations of natural law, and we created weapons that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and we trained every single human being to fight from the moment they could walk." Admiral Wu paused. "We did not do this because we wanted war, Admiral, and we did not spend 1,000 years preparing because we enjoyed it. And the truth is, we hoped this day would never come." "Then why?" Korath demanded. "Because we knew it would come eventually, and the universe is not kind to species that cannot defend themselves, and you have just proven us right." Korath looked at his tactical display and watched more human ships pour from the shipyards. His 3,000 vessels suddenly seemed very small. "You still have a choice," Admiral Wu said, and her voice softened. "You can retreat now and return to the collective with a warning, and no one has to die today." Pride and fear warred in Korath's chest. "I will not flee from humans," he growled, and he signaled his fleet to attack formation. "Your bluffs do not frighten me." Admiral Wu sighed, and she looked genuinely sad. "I was afraid you would say that the human ships moved," and Korath's tactical officers screamed that they were accelerating faster than anything should be able to move. He opened his mouth to give an order. The first human weapon fired. It was not a beam or a missile or anything. Korath recognized reality itself seemed to fold around his flagship and then unfold wrong. The last thing Admiral Korath ever saw was his own bridge twisting into impossible shapes as dimensions that should never touch collapsed into each other. He was dead before his brain could process what was happening. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 47 seconds. 3,000 collective warships became dust and debris, and nothing that attacked Proxima 3 survived across the galaxy. The collective received the news in stunned silence. This was not the easy war they had expected. This was something else entirely, and it was only the beginning. The emergency chamber, deep beneath the collective homeworld, had not been used in over 800 years. Now every high-ranking official of the 17 allied species crowded into the ancient room, and the air was thick with fear and confusion. High Ambassador Vex Thorin stood at the center, and his crystalline form flickered with colors that no one had ever seen him display before. He was afraid. "Report," he commanded, and his voice cracked slightly. Intelligence Director Marn stepped forward, and her serpentine body coiled with nervous energy. The Alpha Centauri attack resulted in total fleet loss within 5 minutes, and there were no survivors and no retreating vessels. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The Tau Ceti offensive never reached its target because human ships appeared at the attack coordinates before our fleet arrived, and we do not understand how they knew. Our plans. Spies. Someone suggested, and Marn shook her head. We have interrogated every suspected informant and found nothing. And somehow the humans knew exactly where we would attack and exactly when. Continue, Vexthorn said, and his glow dimmed further. The siege of Kepler 442 was perhaps the most disturbing, and our forces surrounded what we believed was a lightly defended mining colony. Marn's voice trembled. The colonists did not evacuate, and they did not call for help, and instead, their mining equipment transformed into military hardware right before our eyes, and machines that had been digging ore became weapons that tore through our ships like they were made of paper. The chamber fell silent. How? Vexthorn whispered and his form pulsed weakly. How did we miss this? A young analyst named Keeve stepped forward, and his four eyes blinked nervously. High Ambassador, I believe. I have an answer, but you will not like it. Speak, Keeve activated. A holographic display that showed centuries of surveillance data on human civilization. We have monitored humanity for 1,000 years, and we believed we understood them. And we saw their artists, and their scientists, and their philosophers. And we concluded they had abandoned military development. He zoomed in on images of human cities filled with museums and universities and concert halls. We were wrong. Explain. Vexthorn demanded. Their artists were not simply creating beauty, and they were designing warship aesthetics that function as psychological warfare, and their vessel shapes are deliberately unsettling to non-human minds and cause confusion and fear in enemy crews. Keeve switched to images of human laboratories. Their scientists were not merely pursuing knowledge, and every research project we dismissed as harmless had military applications hidden within, and their agricultural advances were actually logistics improvements for supplying armies, and their medical breakthroughs were actually designed to keep soldiers fighting longer, and their philosophers. Vexthorn asked quietly. Wargaming, and they spent centuries imagining every possible conflict scenario, and they debated strategies for wars that had not yet happened, and they wrote papers about defeating enemies they had not yet met. Keeve's voice dropped, but the most terrifying discovery was their entertainment. He brought up images of human movies and books and games. We dismissed these as primitive distractions, but they were actually training materials distributed to their entire population, and every human child grows up watching stories about war and strategy and survival. And by the time they reach adulthood, they've absorbed more tactical knowledge than most of our military officers. The chamber was deathly quiet. There. Culture is the weapon. Keeve continued, and his voice was barely a whisper. Every song they sing celebrates resilience, and every story they tell teaches them how to overcome impossible odds. And they have spent 1,000 years telling each other that someday someone would try to destroy them, and when that day came, they would be ready. Vexthorn's form dimmed almost completely. We gave them 1,000 years to prepare, and they used every single day. Yes, High Ambassador. A new alert flashed across the displays, and Marn checked her console. Incoming report from the Velkari homeworld, she announced, and her voice shook. The hologram shifted to show the Volcari home system, and a single human ship hung in orbit above the planet. Just one ship, but it had somehow bypassed 14 defensive systems and thousands of patrol vessels. Without being detected, they are broadcasting a message, Marn said. The face of a human male appeared on screen, and he was young with dark skin and patient eyes. This message is for the leaders of the collective and allied species, he said calmly. We have chosen not to destroy your worlds, even though we could do so easily, and we have chosen not to burn your civilizations, even though you would do the same to us. The man paused. We are giving you the chance to end this war before more of your people die, and surrender is available and mercy is offered and you need only ask. The message ended. For a long moment no one spoke. Then War Minister Thrall of the Makari hegemony rose, and his massive form radiated fury. "We will not surrender to humans." He roared, and his voice echoed through the chamber. "We will show them the true meaning of war." He stormed out to rally his forces. Vexthorn watched him go and felt something cold settle in his core. The humans could have destroyed the Velkari homeworld, and they had not. They could have killed billions, and they had chosen mercy. And somehow that was the most terrifying thing of all. Lord Commander Threx of the Makari hegemony was the greatest warrior his species had ever produced. He had fought in 30 campaigns and had never known defeat, and his name was spoken with fear across 100 worlds when the collective lost their fleets. Threx saw only weakness, and when others spoke of surrender, he heard only cowardice. He would show the galaxy how real warriors fought. His target was New Singapore, and it was a human trade hub of 30 million souls with minimal military presence, the perfect place to make a statement. The humans have grown arrogant, he told his officers as their fleet approached the system. They believe their tricks and their hidden weapons make them invincible, but they have never faced the Makari, and they do not understand what true warriors can do. His armada numbered 500 ships, and each one was crewed by soldiers who had trained from birth for combat. They emerged from hyperspace expecting resistance. Instead, they found silence. The human defensive fleet withdrew without firing a single shot, and the orbital platforms went dark, and the colony below made no move to defend itself. "They flee before us." Threx laughed, and his officers joined him. "This is the great human threat that has frightened the collective, and they run from true warriors like prey animals." He ordered his fleet to surround the planet, and his ships formed a perfect blockade, and nothing could escape. "Prepare the bombardment," he commanded, and satisfaction warmed his chest. "We will burn this world and leave nothing but ash." His weapons officer began charging the plasma cannons. Then every screen on every Makari ship flickered, and a broadcast began. A small human appeared on the display, and it was a child with brown hair and curious eyes. She sat at a desk in what looked like a classroom, and she was drawing with colored markers, and her tongue poked out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. "This is Lily," a calm voice narrated over the image. "She is 6 years old, and she likes dinosaurs and her dog Patches, and she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up." The image shifted. Elderly human man knelt in a garden, and his weathered hands were covered in soil, and behind him tomato plants grew in neat rows. "This is Robert, and he fought in the trade wars 70 years ago. And now he grows vegetables and teaches his grandchildren how to fish. And he has never harmed anyone who did not try to harm him first." Threx frowned. "What is this foolishness?" and cut the transmission. "We cannot, sir," his communications officer said, and her voice was uncertain. "They have somehow overridden all our systems." The broadcast continued. A young woman holding an infant and looking at the camera with tired but happy eyes. "This is Maya and her daughter. Iris, and Maya works at the water treatment plant, and Iris was born 3 weeks ago, and this is the only world either of them has ever known." Face after face appeared on the screens, and the voice gave each one a name and a story. A teacher who loved music, and a doctor who volunteered at a free clinic, and children playing in a park, and old friends sharing a meal. "You came here to kill them," the voice said, and it remained calm and gentle. "You came to burn their world and end their stories, and we could stop you very easily." Threx checked his tactical display, and his blood went cold. 200 human ships had appeared behind his fleet, and they formed a perfect formation between his armada and open space. They had been there for hours, and his sensors had never detected them. "We want you to understand something before you make your choice," the voice continued. "Every being you kill has a story like these, and they have people who love them and dreams they hope to achieve." The broadcast showed more faces, and the images came faster. Now a baker covered in flour and laughing at something. Off-screen, a group of teenagers studying together at a library. An old couple dancing slowly in their kitchen. Humans understand the weight of taking a life. The voice said, "We have killed before, and when we had no other choice, we did what we had to do, and we remember every face of every being we have ever harmed, and we carry that weight forever." Threx stared at the screens and the faces of ordinary people looked back at him. "If you fire on New Singapore, we will destroy your fleet, and we will do it in seconds, and none of you will survive. And then we will remember your faces too." The voice paused, not with hatred and not with anger, "and we will remember you with sadness, and we will remember the weight of what you forced us to do." The broadcast showed Lily again, and she had finished her drawing, and she held it up proudly. It was a picture of her family and her dog and her house and a bright yellow sun. "The choice is yours, Lord Commander Threx." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Threx looked at his officers, and they would not meet his eyes. He looked at his tactical display, and the human ships waited patiently behind his fleet. He thought about the faces he had seen and the stories he had heard. Thought about Lily, who wanted to be a veterinarian, and Robert, who grew tomatoes, and Maya, and little baby Iris. "Lord Commander," his weapons officer said quietly, "Your orders." Threx was silent for a long time. He had fought in 30 campaigns and had never known defeat. But he had also never fought an enemy who showed him the faces of the people he was about to kill. He had never been asked to look into the eyes of children and choose to end them anyway. "Stand down," he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. "Sir," I said, "stand down and power down all weapons, and we are leaving." His officers stared at him. "This is not retreat," Threx said, and he spoke louder now. "This is wisdom, and there is no honor in killing those who cannot fight back, and there is no victory in burning children." He looked at the human ships on his display. Set course for home. The Makari fleet withdrew, and they left New Singapore untouched, and somewhere on that planet a little girl named Lily finished her drawing and showed it to her teacher, and she never knew how close she had come to dying that day. Humans had not won through strength alone. They had won through something far more powerful. They had reminded the galaxy that every being has a story worth protecting. Not because humanity crushed the collective beneath their heel, and not because billions died in terrible battles. It ended because one by one the allied species simply stopped fighting. The Makari were first after Lord Commander Threx returned home and told his people what he had seen. The Valkyrie followed when they realized a single human ship above their homeworld could have destroyed them at any moment, but chose not to. Even the proud crystalline beings of Vexthorn's own species began to question why they were fighting an enemy that kept offering peace. Now the leaders of the galaxy gathered once more in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The chamber looked the same as it had 6 weeks ago, but everything had changed. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the podium, and behind her the human delegation sat calmly. High Ambassador Vexthorn approached, and his crystalline form had lost its angry colors, and now he glowed with muted blues and grays. He looked tired and old and small. "I need to understand," he said quietly, and his voice carried through the silent chamber. "You could have conquered us all, and your technology and your preparation made victory certain. But you did not pursue it." He spread his appendages in a gesture of confusion. "Why?" Sarah Chen considered the question for a long moment. 1,000 years ago, we were exactly what you believed us to be," she began, and her voice was gentle. "We were aggressive and territorial and dangerous, and we fought among ourselves as much as we explored the stars." She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. "When you forced the peace upon us, we were furious, and we saw it as an insult and a cage, and many humans wanted to fight back immediately. But you did not." Vexthorn said, "No, and we realized that fighting would only prove you right about us, and so we chose a different path." Sarah stepped forward. 1,000 years is a very long time, Vex Thorin, and humans change and we grow and we learn and we became something different than we were. You built weapons, Vex Thorin said, and there was no accusation in his voice, only confusion. You prepared for war. Yes, because we knew it would come eventually, and the universe does not reward species that cannot defend themselves, and your declaration proved. We were right to prepare. Then why show mercy, and why not use your power? Sarah smiled, and it was a sad and knowing smile, because we also spent those 1,000 years building other things, and we created art that moved us to tears, and music that lifted our spirits, and we raised children to be kind and to see the beauty in all living things. She looked directly at Vex Thorin. We studied every species in this galaxy, and we learned your histories and your cultures and your dreams, and we came to understand that you are not so different from us, and you fear what you do not understand, and you fight when you feel threatened, and you want your children to be safe and happy. The chamber was utterly silent. We could have destroyed you, Sarah continued, and our weapons could have burned every world in the collective, and our fleets could have hunted down every ship that carried your flags. She paused, but then what would we become, and how would we look at ourselves? In the mirror, knowing we had erased entire civilizations, because we had the power to do so. Vex Thorin's form flickered. We would have done it to you, and we were prepared to commit genocide, because we saw you as a threat. Yes, and that is the difference between who we were 1,000 years ago and who we are today. And the old humanity might have responded in kind, but we have grown past that. Sarah reached out and touched Vex Thorin's crystalline form, and the gesture was strange and unexpected and somehow perfect. You gave us 1,000 years of peace, and you meant it as a cage, but we used it as a gift, and we became better than we were. And now we want to give that same gift back to you. What do you mean? We want true peace. This time, and not the peace of the strong holding down the weak, but the peace of equals who choose to work together. She turned to address the entire chamber. Humanity does not ask for reparations, and we do not demand territory or resources or submission, and we have only one request. The alien delegates leaned forward. We want to learn from you, and we want you to learn from us. And we want student exchange programs where your young people come to our worlds and our young people go to yours. Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. That is all. Vex Thorin asked, and disbelief colored his voice. That is everything, and knowledge is more valuable than any weapon, and understanding is more powerful than any fleet, and if we truly know each other, then we will never need to fight again. Sarah stepped back and spread her arms. The war is over, and now the real work begins, and we have a galaxy to build together. The treaty was signed that day, and the terms shocked everyone who read them. Humanity asked for nothing but friendship. In the years that followed, alien students walked the streets of human cities, and human children studied on worlds their grandparents had never heard of. The weapons that humanity had built were never fully revealed, and they remained hidden in pocket dimensions and transformed back into farming equipment, and the galaxy slowly forgot to be afraid. But they never forgot the lesson. True strength was not the ability to destroy, and true power was not the willingness to kill. Humanity had shown them something far more profound. True strength was the ability to choose mercy when you could choose violence. True power was the wisdom to build bridges when you could build walls. And the greatest victory was not the one you won in battle, but the one you won in hearts. The 1,000-year peace had ended, and a new era had begun. This time it would last forever, because this time everyone chose it together. On Earth, a monument was built to commemorate the 6-week war, and it stood in the center of the largest park in the capital city. The inscription reads simply, "We are what we repeatedly do." And for 1,000 years humanity chose to prepare for both war and peace. And in the end, we were ready for either, and we chose peace. Children played. in the shadow of that monument, and they came from 100 different species, and they laughed together in languages their parents had never learned, and somewhere in the stars, a crystalline being named Vex Thorn watched the sunset on a human world, and he finally understood what Sarah Chun had meant. The humans had not just won a war. They had won something far more important. They had proven that even the darkest parts of the soul could be transformed into light, and that was a victory worth 1,000 years of waiting.